Yeah, hello and welcome to the show. This is episode 355 of Stand Up. My guest today, Paul Rieckhoff, joins me for a great hour-long conversation. Also, I've decided to do the show early in the morning rather than late at night as the days get longer. Maybe I only do it today. You know how I am with sticking to things. I like to be all over the place, try new things constantly. But there are good and bad things about routine. Last night after we had dinner, Val and I went for a walk, which is something that we don't normally do, but we had to go vote on the town budget and Board of Education, and as we were walking over there, the sun was still high in the sky at like 7:20, and so I told her how much I missed getting up early in the morning, and I thought all about it. I said, you know what, let me just try this tonight. I went to bed early, got up at 4 a.m. to do the introduction and the news, make it even more relevant to your day if you're listening on Wednesday, May 19th. So welcome to Stand Up. Excellent show. Great conversation with Paul Rieckhoff coming up. We talked about parenting. We talked about family and politics. We talked about media, religion, and, of course, veterans issues, as Paul is the former founder of the Iraq and Afghanistan not the former founder, former executive editor and founder of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, veteran of the Iraq War, author of Chasing Ghosts, all coming up. But first, it's time to get to the news and the last 24. I can hear the birds singing their lovely songs outside the shed. The sun will be starting to peek its head overhead over the horizon in just minutes, and I've got you. Let's take a look back at what made news in the last 24 hours. I suppose one of the advantages of me doing the opening early in the morning is I can grab jokes from the late night shows. Here's my old friend Stephen Colbert trying to help us understand the mask guidelines that are so confusing.
So some stores require a mask, some don't. Some states have mask mandates, others don't. It gets pretty confusing. So here's an easy mnemonic device to remember which states have recently relaxed their mask policies. Okay, here they are. Here's how to remember them. Why is pizza very delicious? Chris? Calories? No. Okay. Yay! Of course, the Y in yay stands for you should always consult mask policy signage at local retailers.
Yeah, Stephen Colbert with putting everything into perspective, and that, I think, is the most important thing. That's what I've learned from talking with you about this and gaining a perspective on life, being grateful for what we have. And during a global pandemic, when people are dying left and right, you reevaluate what you're going to get really upset about. And the worst of it in our country would be over. We've got the miracle vaccine developed in record time, and we're confused about masks. Or more importantly, a lot of people just feel safer with them. People feel safer with them. That's fine. Anybody who wants to wear a mask can. And if somebody asks you to wear a mask over the next couple weeks or even month or longer, then you do or you don't. If you don't want to wear a mask, if your gym insists on it, you don't go to that gym anymore. If a restaurant insists on it, maybe you're not going to go to that restaurant or store anymore. And they're going to have to figure that out. We're all going to have to figure it out. But there's no sense in being outraged by it. Doesn't make any sense to get worked up over such things after what we have seen over the past year. And if we haven't figured that out yet, then we've got a lot of mental work to do in terms of what enrages us. All right, let's head back to NBC's Late Night with Seth Meyers, who did a joke about Donald Trump dropping a dime on Rudy Giuliani, but coming up with a fake name and deciding on that name based on whatever was in the room, a hat, his son. Here it is.
Also, of course, Trump is considering hanging Rudy out to dry. What did Rudy think was going to happen? His client is famous for not paying his bills and turning on everyone around him. I'm shocked Trump hasn't called in an anonymous tip to the feds. Hello, I have information regarding criminal activity committed by Rudy Giuliani. What's my name? It's golf, hat, Donald Trump. Oh, damn it. Don't stand there while I'm trying to think of a fake name. Dad, I'm so sorry.
Ah, very funny, and a great Donald Trump Jr. impression from NBC's Seth Meyers. And now, finally, for the late night shows, let's head over to CBS, where James Corden had a pretty good guest. The former president, Barack Obama, was on, and James Corden asked him about the UFOs that we're hearing all about all of a sudden.
There's footage and records of objects in the skies that we don't know exactly what they are. We can't explain how they moved, their trajectory. They did not have an easily explainable pattern. And so, I think that people still take seriously trying to investigate and figure out what that is. But I have nothing to report to you today.
That last part was in reference to the fact that James Corden asked him if he knew anything about aliens, and President Obama said, when it comes to aliens, there are some things I just can't tell you on air, which implied they could tell James Corden off air. No. What do we know? What do you think about this, by the way? I mean, this is very important and fascinating, and the U.S. military has been putting out these videos, several confirmed videos showing unidentified aerial phenomenon, one of which this is a new one, I think, that just went into the water out in the ocean somewhere. I think it was a naval video. Naval vessel was filming it, and it just defies physics, it would seem, in terms of the speed and their ability to gain such massive amounts of propulsion in very short amount of times, which no engine on Earth can create or produce, small or large. So I don't know. What do you think? It's something I want to talk with you about on this week's Hangout. Thursday night at 8 p.m. Join me for that and whatever else you want to talk about. If there are subjects, questions you want asked, love to hear from you. Email me ideas, as always, standupwithpete@gmail.com. Here's a couple other news stories, mostly related to COVID-19. In India, more than 4,500 people died as of COVID-19 on Tuesday. Who knows how accurate those numbers even are? It's sure that's got to be a lot higher. So earlier I said it's mostly the worst of it over in America. The worst of it is happening in other parts of the world, obviously in India right now. Their highest daily death toll for a single country. Just awful. I'm just reading that now and trying to digest it. Speaking of awful, the governor of Texas will bar local governments from requiring masks. So, again, a ridiculous choice, a political choice. If a local government wants to require a mask for a little longer, they should be allowed to. Is that really that unreasonable? Certainly private establishments should be able to, right? Across Europe, there are hopeful reopenings and an early warning, is a headline in the New York Times. Also, the U.S. has promised 80 million vaccine doses to other countries, but experts say it's not nearly enough. And in Israel, the violence continues, and airstrike damaged Gaza's only lab for processing coronavirus tests, according to officials. Horrific news continuing to come out of the Middle East. A new poll in Japan finds that 83% of Japanese there don't want the Olympics this summer. How about that? The vast majority of the Japanese people don't want the Olympics to happen, and it's looking increasing like it's not going to happen there because of COVID. And finally, Texas, Indiana, and Oklahoma have decided to continue a stupid and brutal and cruel economic policy by cutting off pandemic unemployment benefits, I think, which aren't even coming from their own taxpayers. It's coming from the federal government. So a ridiculous and awful move, in my opinion. We should talk to more economists about that issue, but what do you think? And here's some huge news. The New York Attorney General's office announced that they are going to be looking deeper into the Trump investigation. Here is the quote. We have informed the Trump organization that our investigation into the organization is no longer purely civil in nature. We're now actively investigating the Trump organization in a criminal capacity along with the Manhattan DA. Wow, that is a major development. Reaction from Bloomberg's Tim O'Brien on Twitter. Criminal cases require proof of intent. If New York AG Tish James is ready to convert her civil case against Trump into a criminal prosecution, she must have convincing evidence of intent. This ups the pressure dramatically on Trump, Weisselberg, and the entire Trump organization. And Harry Littman also saying New York AG has converted an investigation into Trump organization into a criminal investigation. Could be very significant, including the overall pressure on Alan Weisselberg. Also, general indication that the discrepancies are so flagrant as to suggest criminal intent. Very interesting development there in that case. Also, news yesterday that Andrew Giuliani, he went on RT. That's right. I think he went on to there. This is where he announced that he'd be running for governor. Andrew Giuliani running for governor of New York. And I was reading about that news and found this clip of Michael Cohen talking about the Trump kids. And then he compares Andrew Giuliani to the Trump kids. Listen to this.
The blowing of the hair to the breaths that she takes. She practices nonstop for any interview, wants all the questions in advance so she knows exactly where she's going with it. And then there's Andrew Giuliani. Andrew makes Eric look like a valedictorian of Harvard. So, right, I mean, I think if I'm not mistaken, Andrew even failed Trump University. That's to give you an idea of just how stupid he is, right?
Michael Cohen with some jokes on the Midas Touch podcast, by the way. Yesterday, President Biden was out in Michigan where he test drove a Ford electric pickup truck as part of a visit to the Ford plant in Dearborn, during which he touted electric vehicles as, quote, the future of the auto industry. He took the Ford F-150 Lightning electric pickup truck, which apparently the company plans to officially unveil this week for a spin during his visit at the plant. He actually got behind the wheel and drove it with the old Ray-Bans on. And here is a little bit, just a quick clip from that. And in this clip, he just driving all over, tearing around this test track that they have. And then he is about to go back out and show them again how fast it goes. Here it is.
Mr. President, how fast were you going?
Okay, I'm just going to step on it. I'll come off at 80 miles an hour. You'll see what it is, okay? You ready?
Mr. President, can I ask you a quick question on Israel before you drive
No,
away?
you can't. Not unless you get in front of the car as I step on it. I'm only teasing.
What?
Okay, here we go. You ready?
See it, sir.
What? Can we ask you a question about Israel? Not unless you get in front of the car and let me drive you over. Well, that wasn't funny. I didn't like that at all, but whatever. I mean, he should have said, you know what? I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that after what you guys have been through with the last guy. And as a matter of fact, once I get done showing off this car to help Ford sell them, I'm going to come back and you are going to get the first question, and it can be on Israel or whatever you want. He should have said that. That's what I would have said if I were the president, but I'm not the president. I'm standing in my shed hosting a podcast. So who the hell am I to criticize? All right, now I want to play for you Congressman Jim Mcgovern. I've met Congressman Jim Mcgovern, interviewed him many times. He represents the 2nd District of Massachusetts. He is much more influential now because he's been there a while. I really like him. I think he's uncorruptible, and I love this clip. Here he is on CNN last night talking about the bipartisan commission to look into and to investigate January 6th. And Aaron Burnett asks a great question about Leader Kevin McCarthy, who now opposes this bill to form a January 6th commission. It's going to happen anyway. Here it is.
Matters, and he matters for his rank and file, and Scalise going out and urging them. Right? They don't want any Republicans to vote for this, right? They want to make this look as political as possible. Why do you think, when you try to get to the bottom of it, McCarthy opposes the January 6th commission, which, as I want to know, was negotiated by a Republican and would be bipartisan?
Well, that's a good question. I've concluded that Kevin McCarthy is a weak and cowardly individual who's afraid of Donald Trump. I wouldn't be surprised if Donald Trump told him to try to kill this. But here's the sad thing. The ranking Republican member of the Committee on Homeland Security worked out this deal with Chairman Benny Thompson. And it's a bipartisan deal. And by the way, Kevin McCarthy sent a letter to Speaker Pelosi with all these demands that he said were necessary in order to win his support, including a evenly split Democrat-Republican number of commissioners, equal subpoena power, I can go on and on and on. But we met all these things. We met all these conditions. All the things that Kevin McCarthy wanted have been included in this compromise. And yet, to everybody's surprise, I guess, maybe not to everybody's surprise, but he came out today and said he was against it. And I think the only reasonable conclusion is that he's afraid of Donald Trump. And he doesn't want to offend him, doesn't want to get disinvited to Mar-a-Lago. But it is sad and it is pathetic. And getting to the truth matters here. You know, I was there on January 6th. I was the last person off the House floor. I had to tell members to get their gas masks before they evacuated. I walked out into the Speaker's lobby and saw this mad mob breaking the glass. There were Republicans there as well. Yeah. And my hope is that my fellow Republicans will stand up to the bully in Mar-a-Lago and do the right thing and get to the truth. The American people deserve the truth and deserve the truth by a bipartisan commission.
You think about all the investigative commissions that Republican congressmen got together and looked into when President Obama was at the helm, from Benghazi to Fast and Furious. I mean, they investigated all kinds of shit that never needed any investigation. And, of course, they don't investigate things that absolutely deserve an investigation. All right, let's listen to Republican Senator Lisa Mikowski of Alaska, who CNN congressional reporter Manu Raju caught up with in the halls of Congress. I thought this was an important thing to share with you as well.
But also some Republicans, too, who have pushed back on the idea of broadening out this probe. I asked one of them, who's Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, someone who is signaling a support for this idea of a bipartisan commission, and she raised concerns by going too broad. It could take the focus off of what really is the most significant thing in her view, which was the attack on the Capitol.
I will look to what he has stated in terms of how broad it needs to be. If you're really making this a very broad brush approach, it might be difficult to really get a value from a specific type of commission. But again, I think this is something where you need to look closely to the details and how it's configured.
Do you think former President Trump should talk to this commission to detail what was happening on that day?
If you put together a commission that is focused on the events of January 6th, I think he's obviously a very key individual.
All right, that is all the audio I've got for you today's episode of Stand Up with Pete Dominic Daily. And now it's time to get to all of the rest of the headlines I want to read that I throw in a segment I like to call the news dump.
Hungry lion on the plains, see how high it jumps. It's pounced on human poachers for today's news dump.
Oh, yeah, lion, get those human poachers. Another great jingle from Pete Coe. Is that the one Phil Round helped you with? Listeners collaborating together. Could there ever be anything more beautiful? All right, let's get to your news dump right now. Here is everything else I've got left for you. Congresswoman Val Demings is planning to challenge Senator Rubio for the Florida Senate in 2022. That's an interesting development. The FBI is investigating an alleged Susan Collins campaign donation scheme, according to TheHill.com. A top Japanese doctors group calling for the Olympics to be canceled, which I touched on earlier in the opening. A Michigan judge is rejecting one of the final remaining challenges to the 2020 election results. Bank of America raising the minimum wage from $25 an hour by 2025. Well, that's cool that Bank of America, who has trillions of dollars, is raising the minimum wage in like 4 more years. The Discovery Channel, a new Discovery Channel show, is going to send the winner of a contest to the International Space Station, which I think is hilarious. What if the winner decides that they don't want to go anymore? Can they then give it up to the runner-up? Who wants to go to the International Space Station as well? I mean, I think, obviously, that'd be amazing, but I wonder how many people will actually enter that contest. That would be a very interesting thing to find out. A U.S. task force is now recommending that colon cancer screening start at age 45, which means I need to get my colon cancer screening, but because I have now mispronounced it twice, maybe I don't even deserve one. Colon cancer screening. Age 45, I'll have to ask Dr. Aaron Carroll if he agrees with the key panel of experts that released this recommendation from the American Medical Association. When did you have your first colon cancer screening, guys? It is the third deadliest form of cancer among men and women in the U.S. So I should, I don't know why I just said guys. I didn't realize it was that high in women as well. Forgive my insensitivity. Wow. Approximately 52,980 people in the country are projected to die from it this year. Yikes. Get screened. Saw this story. Want to make sure I mentioned it in the dump. 3 of the 40 prisoners still at Guantanamo Bay U.S. military prison have been approved for release, a lawyer for one said Tuesday. The first such approvals under the administration of President Joe Biden. A lot of fallout, I'm sure, that will occur as a result of that. And I'm very interested in this story. I've always been interested in these stories about the prisoners at Guantanamo Bay detention facility who are tortured there, and just so much horror and so much embarrassment and indignity and really illegal activity by the United States government detaining them there. But that is good news, if you ask me. And here's some bad news, if you ask me. Did you get your gun yet? Gun sales on pace for a record year. Gun stores nationwide are seeing an increase in customers. According to the FBI, there are almost 16 million background checks for firearm purchases during the first 4 months of this year. That's a 31% increase compared to the same time in 2020. However, apparently 9% of those background checks were all on one man, Ted Nugent. So, yeah, he's just building an army and an arsenal. I'm joking, but I'm sure a lot of people did buy a second, third, and 500th guns as well, because a lot of people are crazy. Oh, but what could be more American than gun purchases, sales, and ownership? And as I wrap up the news dump and the birds are chirping, the sun is now fully up at 6:11 a.m. And I read this story from The Guardian. There are about 50 billion individual birds in the world, according to new research that uses citizen science observations to try to estimate population numbers for almost 10,000 species. A new paper led by the scientists with the University of New South Wales suggests there are about 6 times as many birds on the planet as humans. And in a related story to the last one, about half of them own firearms, which I thought was crazy. Birds with guns. But many individual species, of course, are rare. Anyway, 4 species belong to what the researchers dubbed the Billion Club, with estimated populations greater than 1 billion. They are the house sparrow, found in many parts of the world, the European starling, the ring-billed gull, and the barn swallow. And I thought that would be a good story to end the news dump on. We need to take care of these birds, which are always beautiful and miraculous and wonderful to watch be born this time of year and soar above our heads the rest of the year. Okay, I don't know why I tried to get all poetic at the end there, and I should not do that off the cuff or really ever. But that is today's news dump for you, brought to you each and every day this month by Indeed. Indeed.com/standup. If you're looking to hire people at your company, at your job, go to Indeed.com/standup right now. Seriously, go to that website right now and at least click on that link, Indeed.com/standup, and they'll know you're listening, and hopefully you'll be able to find some great candidates for your company. I'll do the official ad read tomorrow, but I just always want to mention them and thank them for sponsoring this podcast. And thank all of you for your subscriptions, because I definitely cannot do it without you. I can't be out here in the shed late at night, early in the morning, whatever time I'm doing the shed, the interviews on the podcast, without your subscription. So go to patreon.com/Pete Dominick and join our amazing community of listeners who are networking and who are learning from each other how to make the best of their lives and learn as much as we can on this journey we are on together. So thank you very much for that. And now it's time to get to my first and only guest of today's program. He is an old friend of mine. Folks love when he joins me here. He is now the host of his own podcast, formerly called Angry Americans. It's now called Independent Americans. And I really enjoy listening to Paul Rieckhoff's podcast. I highly recommend it. and supporting him as well in every way that you can. He's got his own media company called Righteous Media, where he's doing excellent work and working his ass off. He's also a happily married man, father of 2 young boys. Then we talked about family and parenting in this conversation, which I always enjoy discussing. I met Paul through my work with his veterans organization that he founded after his service in Iraq in the United States military, called Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, IAVA.org. He's the founder and former executive director there. They're still continuing to do great work, and he's on the advisory board, I think, right, Paul? And anyway, we had an awesome conversation about politics, about parenting, life, and, of course, veterans issues. We get into it and argue a little bit, as we always do, and as you often do, you'll agree with Paul or the guest and not me, and I really want to hear from you on any of those discussions that sometimes become arguments here on the show, which I always enjoy and learn a lot from the conversation, the argument, and those of you who listen and weigh in on it. So would love to hear what you think about that. All right, here he is right now. He is on Twitter, at Paul Rieckhoff. Check the show notes for all of the links I told you about him. Let him know that you heard him here on the program, and here we go. We are recording now with Paul Rieckhoff, who joins me, and I've been listening to your latest episodes of your podcast, Independent Americans, formerly Angry Americans at Righteous Media, and you've added a podcast, which I want to ask you about, but I'm really enjoying your interviews and the things that you say before and after your podcast, including even when you talk about your sons who drop toys in your toilet.
Yes. Well, thank you for that support. I will give you an update. My 2-year-old son, River, has again stuffed up one of the toilets of our house. For basically the last 2 months, we only have 2 toilets in this house. One, if not both toilets, are completely clogged for a variety of different things that River throws down the toilet. Most of all, matchboxes. But this time, it's a ball. It's a ball that's somewhere, which went down there. My wife, I was like, Lauren, did you leave him in there? And she said, oh. And I said, what was in his hand? And she's like, I'm not sure. I said, think, what was in his hand? And she looks at me, she goes, oh, it was that rainbow ball. I was like, oh, the one that's about exactly the same size as the pipe? She said, yeah. And of course, it's below the toilet. So it's somewhere between the toilet and my septic tank. And I'm hoping it's, $100 plumber bill and not a $5,000 plumber bill. But, he thinks it's a fun game. So this is like pandemic parenting, man. This is a fun game in our house.
Maybe time with this issue, maybe time to get a snake, buy one of those snakes just to have it. And then you take it as a parent, an opportunity to teach your 2-year-old how to operate that snake. Daddy's got to throw the snake down the toilet every time you drop a toy in.
Got the snake. He's now mastered the art of finding something that creates suction that can resist the snake. So the ball, actually, I think he tried this, really thought about this, and got a ball that was perfectly sized to go further and around that I can't get it with the snake, and I probably have to rip the whole house apart. So happy
You're gonna need engineers.
Let's go. Let's fucking go. Here we go. Back with Dominic.
You're going to need engineers from the Deepwater Horizon drill emerges. This is a tough case. Have you found yourself in that point of parenting now with your 2-year-old where your son has done something twice now that has caused a major problem here? And the first couple times you say it in the best possible way because you're dad and you're smart and you want to have the right outcome. But then on the third time, that's when you become previous generation dad. And you just let him really just start screaming, you got to stop throwing shit down the toilet, River. Where are you at?
Well, yeah, I'm not quite there yet. I definitely have a newfound respect for my father's patience or their lack of. I have not yet gotten to the point where I sound like my father when he says, you want something to cry about, I'll give you something to cry about, which is like, the, hey, Johnny, here's a pack of smokes from Breakfast Club stuff. I'm not there yet. Okay. But I am practicing deep breathing. I am drinking a lot of coffee. I am having fun. We're trying to make every day fun. We're excited about the reopening. We're doing shit like my son did BMX racing last night, which is reopened, which was awesome. And we went to a dirt track speedway last week. So we're cranking it up in the Rieckhoff house. We're going to make this a good summer. We paid our dues and we had a rough year, and we're gonna have some fun.
Well, I heard you talking a little parenting with one of your guests on your podcast, Wes Cheatham, the actor. Yeah,
he's awesome.
It's great interview. I really enjoyed it. Everybody should go listen to that episode of Independent Americans with my guest now, Paul Rieckhoff. And you mentioned something about how you have this mantra that you say to your boys. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I do little things like that, but I bet you Paul has a bunch of that kind of communication stuff that he does with his kids, mantras or habits. Can you share with me a little bit about how you look at parenting in terms of repetitively saying things to kind of drill in their head a certain set of values or behavioral techniques?
Yeah, sure. And we had Wes Chatham on. He's awesome. He's a dad of 2 young boys. He's also a Navy vet that has the greatest discovery story of all time. I won't spoil it, but he was in the Navy and he got discovered, and now he's a big TV and movie star on the sci-fi hit The Expanse, which I also just want to recommend. It's my favorite sci-fi show of all time, which might be the most provocative thing I've said on my show ever, according to the reaction so far from sci-fi fans. But yeah,
you raved about it so much that and that made me want to watch it. Actually, it worked. How much you talked about
really
it, but
good.
yeah,
you got to push through maybe parts of the first season, but I think it's better than the new Battlestar Galactica. It's better than Doctor Who. It's better than both Star Treks. Now I know this is provocative stuff, like Israel. Talking about Israel is easy compared to arguing.
Yeah, the attacks
all the time, right? But the lessons that Wes and I were talking about, I think, one really simple one that I've been doing that sounds a little cheesy, but it's good. When we wake up in the morning, as soon as I can remember, I usually say, okay, guys, today's going to be a great day. And I'm kind of a dick about it. I'm like, come on, guys, today's going to be a great day. And sometimes I'll be like, no, Dad. I'm like, come on. Let's say it. Today's going to be a great day. And then Mom says it. Both boys say it. And then we get our day going, because it's about winning the day and making the most out of it, because you don't know what's going to happen, especially over the last year and a half. And they're little. They've been through a lot of adversity. And I think sometimes I underestimate how tough it's been for them. They're 5 and 2. And their whole world is upside down. They can't touch people anymore. They can't go on playgrounds. They have to armor. And they've been incredibly resilient and inspiring to me in so many ways. But I think we also have to recognize that for them, it's like growing up in a war zone. I mean, they're thinking about death all the time. They're afraid of getting sick. There's a lot of fear and anxiety. And I'm trying to bring them through this. I said in the beginning of the pandemic, I felt like, I'm a combat vet. I don't want to make it sound too extreme, but I didn't know where this was going to go. And my goal was to grab my wife by her hand, wrap the kids in my chest, and just run through the battlefield and try to let them not get hit. Like, get through this battlefield, however long it is, watch out for the landmines, watch out for the rockets, and try to get my family and my kids especially through this with minimum harm. Right. And I'm not going to save them from everything. They're going to see some things. They're going to experience some things. Hopefully it'll make them stronger. But I think as we start to come out of this, wherever we are in coming out of this, we're going to go through a couple phases that are not dissimilar to combat. And our kids have a lot to deal with. And we got to be there for them and recognize that it's been hard for them, hard in ways we can't even understand.
Yeah. Trying to recognize long-term trauma is harder than recognizing short-term trauma, but you got to recognize trauma of any sort, and trauma comes in weird ways, and people receive it and experience it differently. But how about this question? Because you're all about independent thinking, independent Americans. Political parties are a big part of the problem, and partisanship and so on. And we have a lot of agreement on that. But more specifically, what are the values that you're teaching your kids? Because I got in an argument with some guy online about how important that universal pre-K is, because as you know, your kids are at that age. It's super important that they're in school, that they're learning to read and being around other kids and so on. All the data proves that. But then what are the values? This guy argues like that's just more government brainwashing. And I said, wait a second. What are they teaching, Paul, at nursery school, at universal pre-K? I didn't think what they were teaching was conservative or liberal or religious. I thought it was something, certain values that we kind of all agreed on. What are you trying to teach your kids at such young ages in terms of values? What matters to you and your wife?
I think, they're small. So we're starting with core values. And I think that's really...
Yeah, that's what I mean, that age. Yeah.
Like respect. Okay, respect your classmates, respect the school bus, respect, when we're out hiking, if we see a piece of garbage, pick it up, because we're respecting the land, we're respecting the animals. But also, maybe the most important thing that some of my friends have taught me is explain the why. Don't just say, pick up that piece of garbage. Say, listen, man, pick up that piece of garbage, because if you don't, a bear might eat it. and you like bears, bears are going to get sick. Bears can't eat, a M&M's wrapper. It might make that baby bear sick. The baby bear might die. You couldn't eat an M&M wrapper, so don't do that, right? And it makes work for other people. Respect the things around you and honor them, I think is really important, but explain the why. Because too many parents right now, I think a lot of us have been short fused. None of us are getting enough sleep. We're all exasperated. And I said to you earlier, even depleted. And I think we've got to go back to core values of respect, honor, integrity, courage is a big one that I'm asking my son to do the right thing and stand up for his brother and stand up for himself. Those kind of basic things. And really, there is a silver lining here. They're learning how to take care of each other and learning that they're interconnected in a way that our generation probably didn't. They can see the real impacts of things like wearing a mask and getting a vaccine. And I think maybe most of all, Pete, like leading by example. When I went to get my vaccine shot, I took my 5-year-old with me because I wanted him to see it. I wanted him to understand. I didn't want him to be afraid. I wanted him to meet people who gave him candy and explained to him what science was all about. And then now when I take him to get his vaccine, if we have that conversation and that happens later in the year, he's seen it and he's seen me do it. And it's not a mythical, scary, big thing that he's heard about from some kid on the back of the school bus. So, that's... Did
you cry when you got the shot? Did you scream in horror and pain and cry?
No.
That could then backfire. Imagine if big Paul Rieckhoff gets a shot in front of his kid to prove it, to do everything you're saying, and then he's like, "Oh my God, it's horrible."
Look, and that's another key point in parenting that I learned is honesty. Like, and my wife and I go back and forth. Sometimes she's like, "Don't tell him it's going to hurt." I'm like, "It's going to hurt. I'm going to tell you, dude, this thing is going to hurt. This thing is not going to hurt. If you get stung by a bee, it's going to hurt. If you get poked with a needle, it might hurt a little bit. It might not. If you fall off your bike and hit your face on the ground, that's really going to hurt, dude. I'm not going to bullshit you and tell you it's not going to hurt." So framing up for him and being honest and knowing that he can trust me, I think is a really key foundation. But look, the trauma piece is one thing I want to touch on because I think this is a really important point. This whole pandemic has a lot of flows that are not dissimilar from a world war or combat. And we've gotten through the hard part. Like it's kind of like World War II where the bombs have been dropped, Hitler's dead, they're kind of skirmishes, things are starting to happen. And now we're going into like the big VC day, the victory over coronavirus day. We're going to have a big party and that's going to be awesome. But it's also going to kind of be like the 101st Airborne in Paris. They're going to drink too much. They're going to fight. They're going to get in car crashes. There's going to be good stuff, but there's also going to be kind of a bit of recklessness. And then we're going to go through the summer. And after that all settles down, we're going to have to process a pretty traumatic experience and the loss and the hurt and the financial challenges and the reality that the party's over and there's work to do. Right. And so I've been trying to get my head around that, but also communicating to others that, yeah, we should have a good time. We earn this. The summer is going to be great, but also recognize, the party is not going to last forever and we got work to do. And there's still real problems. And, our country is still in a very fragile place. And we got to talk about and process trauma openly. That includes the honest conversations you're having about mental health and about parenting. We got some folks who really, really had a lot of trauma this year, and we got to be sensitive to that.
Yeah, you know a lot about that, obviously, as a veteran and dealing with it when you were running IAVA and as an advocate. But so you started before I even hit record, and you mentioned it after record, with this word depleted. So I think it's interesting. It's super important for Paul Rieckhoff to talk about what he's struggling with, because when I met you, you were running this organization that you founded, and you were a big deal, and everybody looked up to you. And sometimes when we look up to people, when they're leaders, when they're inspiring, when they are people like the kind of guy you are, you think, well, he's got it all together. This guy's the full package. I mean, he's like a 7 physically, but everything else, he's really got it together. And you start to put people on a pedestal and say, he's perfect. He really knows what he's doing. Look how much he's accomplished at such a young age. Look at who he knows. Look at what he's done. But the truth is that person does not exist, never has, never will. And I think it's super important when we can be as honest as we can be about what we're struggling with. So I now ask you, what does it mean for you to say that you're depleted?
A good friend of mine, Daryl Hammond, founded an incredible nonprofit called Kaboom that builds playgrounds for kids all around the world. And he taught me about a concept called powerful vulnerability. He said, as a leader, there's another level of leadership you can get to when you say, I don't know what to do, or I'm having a hard time, or I need help. And there have been a couple of times in my career where we needed money, or we needed guidance, or we needed partners. We needed, all these things, data. And you just put it out there and say, guys, I don't have the answer. I don't know what to do. I need help. And I did that a lot, especially in the later years when I was at IAVA. And I think that was important strategically. But it was also important to set the right example for our community to say getting help and asking for help is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. And the same way you wouldn't let your, seeping wound in your knee or your leg just go without going to see a doctor. You can't let your mental health or mental health injuries go without treatment and without addressing them. So for me, I work out, I stretch, I miss some days. I try not to drink too much. I try to eat healthy, but maybe, especially in the pandemic, I talk to my therapist every single week for an hour, every single Monday. I go for a walk and I talk to my therapist. Used to be in person, but it's essential to me to work out what's going on in my head, to have someone who's there just for me, for nothing else, but kind of like a mental health personal trainer, someone who is there to help me get through something and work through something and succeed. Yep. And that's been absolutely essential to me. I mean, more than almost anything in my family, of course, my health, but understanding the importance of therapy and understanding you got to find the right therapist. It may not be the first person you meet. It's kind of like dating. Sometimes you got to find the right chemistry. But
I'm so glad you're doing that. I'm so glad you're getting those benefits. I actually see someone every day, and it's not a therapist. It's a weird relationship to some extent. However, it's a friend where we are, arguably codependent on each other to some extent. But he is a super successful guy and family man in Australia. And I've talked about it openly, David Campbell. And we talk a lot. And I've certainly been more dependent on him. He peeled me off the ground when I lost my job, and he's just always there for me. We just talk about our parenting stuff, our marriage stuff, our financial stuff, our afraid of death stuff, mortality stuff, and morality. And it's super helpful. And like you said, I saw a couple of other therapists and I couldn't find the right one. This has really worked for me. I highly recommend that people use this Marco Polo app to communicate too. That's the other thing. I say my piece, he says his piece, and you're forced to listen. Mm-hmm. How's it going for you? Are you finding yourself repeating the same things? That's what I struggle with.
Yeah. And I've done another thing where, so I do my therapy for an hour. And then I try to listen to a song. I'm physically active, walking or hiking or moving around while I'm doing it. And then afterward, I try to process. And then I do like 3 to 5 buddy checks. I call 3 to 5 of my friends and just say, hey, I'm just calling to check in on you. I know you had someone in your family that was sick, or I know your kid had a hard time, or I just miss you. And I think parents can especially feel isolated right now. You have the weight of the world on your shoulders. Maybe you have older parents you're worried about, children you're worried about, siblings. There's just a lot of pressure on us, and we're in it together. And for me, my mentors have been essential. And my mentors are people who've been through a lot and can help me understand. If I say, hey, I'm having a hard time talking to my kid, or I don't know what to do about this financial situation, or how do I get a mortgage? It could be a lot of different things, right? But also leaning on people who have expertise and experience in what I'm facing. Because it's easy to just throw a net out there and go, hey, can anybody help me with this, sick kid? But when you talk to someone who's had a sick kid, it's a game changer. They have the secret decoder ring. They can help you, and then you can pull others through. So I know it sounds a little, maybe for some people it sounds cheesy, but we're really in this together. And there's a lot of hard times happening. There's still going to be a lot of hard times. And if you're doing great, then call 7 people instead of 5, because everybody gets their turn. Nobody's bulletproof. Everybody's going to get their turn where you have a hard time. And if we can be a little bit more compassionate, a little more empathetic, and a little more real, and stop bullshitting, right? Like you don't post Instagram pictures of when you have a shitty time, right? You only post Instagram pictures of things that are great. Like real Instagram would be like, here's me fighting with my wife. Here's, my 2-year-old punching me in the face.
Well, I always say I have a joke about
like whatever it is, right? Like,
I have a joke in my stand-up act, which is exactly what you're saying. Instagram, social media, pictures is what you want everybody to think is you in your life, the image you want to present. If you really want to know about someone, tell them to post their internet history, their browsing history. That's who you really are. That's who you are, you dirtbag.
There's 2 kinds of Instagram. This is something a friend told me too. There's people who Instagram like this, facing for folks who are listening, with the camera facing you, and there are folks who Instagram like this, facing out. So I like to follow and try to be a person who shows what I'm seeing, not me. Like I can't stand Instagram with pictures of 5,000 people, 5,000 pictures of yourself. That's just
my Instagram feed is just like mostly shirtless photos of me. It's called Dad Bod.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it. By the way, you're looking fit. You look like you're fit. The layer, it continues to evolve. The studio layer, more colors, more things in the back, and that's a really good sign of how you've evolved and improved, and the show has grown and your audience has grown. And I'm going to give you a shout out. You didn't ask for one, but like, you are that person that's giving people hope and connection. And when I did a Zoom with you, you had, I don't know, like hundreds of listeners on there and this community around your show. And that's the kind of stuff that I think is really going to matter when we look back on the last year, a couple of years ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's very kind. You always are someone who does actually do what you said and turns the camera back, which is what you just did to me, and I appreciate that. And we'll try to pay it forward by taking more photos of me and posting them. But I'm doing good, but I think going back to your podcast with West, how do you pronounce his last name? Chatham. Excuse me, I always get that last name wrong. Yep. And he said something, and I don't know if you remember it, and now I'm forgetting it, but it's this phrase that someone gave to him about, fit body, quiet mind.
Happy house, something like that. Happy house.
Happy family or happy house. And I love those kinds of things that water down all the things you're concerned about, your anxieties, these things that we're talking about, as mantras to remember, because that's what I come back to in my mindfulness practice. I say, how am I doing in terms of my, am I taking good care of myself, fit body and sound mind? What am I thinking about? I mean, I love that. Do you have other practices like that that you share that you do every day? Have you been taking good care of yourself physically?
I think good parenting is kind of like good songwriting. I think it was like Johnny Cash or Willie Nelson who said, we're going to write a song called Let's Sit Around and Steal Each Other's Songs. Right? Like they basically, all good artists draw from other places. And
sure. Yeah.
Good parents draw from other parents too.
Osmosis. Yeah.
A couple quick ones. One, when my wife was pregnant, somebody gave me advice, which was every time you're around another parent, ask them for one piece of parenting advice. So the entire time my wife was pregnant, I was traveling all around the world. I would ask cab drivers, people at the airport. I was sitting at a restaurant. Hey, you a parent? You got any advice? And the advice I got was tremendous. So I think that's always useful. The other thing that's really important to me and our family is music, especially when you're all inside a place or there's stress. Just putting on music can kind of lighten the mood. It can help with the energy. It can shift things in a different direction. And, it can be any kind of music. Like sometimes we'll listen to Sinatra at dinner and we'll listen to Tiesto at breakfast. I mean, it's all different kinds of stuff, but just taking that time, like put some music on. It creates this connective tissue and a little levity. And I stole one from Stephanie Rule. She was a guest on my show from MSNBC, and we do roses and thorns at dinner. Go around the table. What's something that was really great that happened in your day and something that was really challenging? And creating that space where we talk about it. My 2-year-old does it. And sometimes he's like, my road is trash truck. And the trash truck went by. That was a highlight of his day. But hey, that was a highlight of his day. A trash truck went by. And it's great. And
you share your thorn. You're like, my thorn was when you threw a toy in the toilet and my entire day had to be put on shelf. So I get that toy. You son of...
You know what, though? Like that, when you have to stop and think about it, the toilet never comes up. It's not like, that wasn't really a hard part of my day. It might have been like, oh, I saw you fall out of a tree and that made my heart drop. And that was really hard for Daddy because I was really worried that you might be landing on your head. Right. But it just forces you to slow down and think about it. And I thank Stephanie Rule for that.
Yeah, I love that. We did that when the girls were younger, too. And now it's all we can do just to get everybody at the table together. Yeah. So let me ask you about some veterans issues that I wanted to talk with you about. But actually, before that, I know you're going to be talking on your show, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts on it, about what is happening right now in Israel and Gaza. You obviously are a combat veteran. You served in Iraq, and you read and have thoughts and have friends across the political spectrum, the religious spectrum, Muslims and Jewish and non-secular, and you name it. So I'm sure you have a thoughtful take on all of this. What is it?
Yes. I mean, I don't know if my take that much more thoughtful than anyone else, but I've been to the region. I've been, all over the Middle East. I have friends of all backgrounds, but I'm also, I consider myself an amateur policy expert, right? And a military planning, strategic communications, foreign policy. I think there's something different here. And I'm going to draw a really weird parallel. But when the George Floyd case happened, it was the first time, I think, that most white people were rooting for him to be guilty. Most white people, including racist white people, were like, boy, I think this guy should be guilty. And I think
we're rooting for Derek Chauvin to be guilty.
Right?
Yep.
The former officer Chauvin to be guilty. And that was important, right? I think that this moment is important. And this is not a value analysis. It's an analysis of the situation. I think Israel's lost the globe on this one. I think that Israel has lost the narrative that they want to put out there, and they've got most of the country, the world, that's objective, that doesn't have a dog in the fight, sees dead kids and buildings getting blown up, right? They see a bunch of poor people, 2 million people in an area of Gaza, and a big military that's pounding them. It looks like Gaza is the little guy and Israel is the big bully. That's how it looks. Now, you may separating all the policy and all the history, which is difficult to do, but I think important when you just look at it objectively, right? When the AP is saying you bombed their building, when there are kids that are dead and there are images, and this is different, right? Regardless of the military conflict, if you can't control the images, we know that from Vietnam, we know that now from Afghanistan. If you can't control the story, you lose your friends, you lose the backing, you lose the narrative, you lose the story. And I think that's what's happening now, and Israel is uniquely tone deaf to it right now. And they've got a harder right leadership than they've had before that maybe doesn't care. But this one is very different, and it could extend into an entire regional war. And I think what you're seeing is allies are going to sit out. And that's what some folks can do where if they don't pick a side and they're just quiet. That is a big thing, too. And you see how long it took America to respond, how long it took Biden to say anything. And now I hope we get toward that peaceful place. But this is messy. It's all intertwined. And I think Israel's overplaying their hand from a strategic standpoint. And I think that is going to change this framework for a very long time.
I think that you're good to say in that if you put policy and history aside, and you can't, but if you did, I think actually a different way of saying that is, if someone didn't know anything about the history, didn't know anything about Gaza or Israel, and just tuned in, which is not hypothetical, it's true. Every generation of Americans or of people all over the world turn on their, in this case, I would argue TikTok. This is where it's mostly playing out on TikTok, on social media, but especially TikTok. And they see the Israelis and they see, as you just described it, and that's how they come to it. And then they learn about the history and the policy of it. And so I think that it is happening. And you make really good points about the PR war and why, sadly, that is in many ways what matters, because that's what perception, policy, politics is perception.
Yeah, the younger generation, and especially the younger generation of political leaders, maybe don't remember the war in 2014, maybe don't remember the founding of Israel, maybe didn't know grandparents who were in the Holocaust, right? They're watching TV and they're looking at it objectively. And war is not a game. But if you flip on a game and you see a team is up by 30 and dunking on the other team, right? Yep. And they're all 7-footers and the other team is, you look at it and go, wow, that's not really a fair fight. You can size that situation up quickly. And in this new media environment, young people can see what they see. They can see it unfolding and they can make their own judgments. And they don't have those preconceived notions. And maybe also they don't have the understanding of history, but they do understand pain and empathy and humanity. And no one wants to see kids dead. Right. No. And if you keep killing kids, you're going to lose the country. You're going to lose the war. You're going to lose the battle.
I wonder how you think that issue plays out domestically, politically. First and foremost, do Americans care enough to the point that they would vote based on that issue? And I think that probably a lot of Jewish Americans and Arab or Muslim Americans do. To some extent, some stronger than others, and that they range, obviously, liberal, conservative, Republican, Democrat. But I don't think most Americans that aren't directly affected will be thinking about this issue come election time for their congressman and their senator. Nonetheless, I do wonder what you think, how you think this issue breaks down domestically, politically, for the Biden administration, or if it's even a blip when it comes to voting in the midterms, much less in, the next presidential election.
I think that the most important factor right now, and this is true for Israel, it's true for Afghanistan, it's true for North Korea, is that we got our own fucking problems. That's the bottom line here. Like more than any other time in our lifetime, Our neighbors are dying. Our schools are closed. We're wearing masks. We had an insurrection. Our economy's fucked up. We have our own problems right now. Now, that affects everything. It doesn't mean we shouldn't pay attention, but I've called Afghanistan Forgotistan. Well, now all of foreign policy is Forgotistan. And that's to be expected in some ways, but America is often navel gazing. We also often don't think about our foreign shores. And that's sometimes to our advantage, right? Where I think we need to move away from Afghanistan and focus domestically, but we shouldn't take our eyes off the fact that the Russians might be starting a war in the Ukraine. You know, we're seeing military flare-ups in the Arctic. You know, the North Koreans are flexing their muscles. There's plenty going on in the world that could impact us and may impact us that we should be aware of. But I think most Americans would not put Israel in their top 5 right now.
And you're right about foreign issues, foreign wars overall. It's a really good point, simply because our plane's going down. We got to put our mask on first, or we can't go put out other fires when we have our own fires. And, you know, we need to rebuild America literally right now before we start building some other country. Just a few different ways of looking at what you just said, I think.
And the Israeli conflict, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, right, is going to be hurt by America's lack of focus, because we can be a positive influence, we can be a peacemaker, right? However, if we're going to pick a side, normally, you know, it definitely would be Israel in the past. That's the side we've picked, right? But now, I think the situation is also manifesting itself because our political parties have changed. The Democratic Party is not lockstep with Israel like it used to be, especially the younger generation, the progressives, and the Republican Party.
The foremost Jewish leader, who happens to be, you know, isn't religious, but Bernie Sanders is critical of it. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
And you've got a Republican Party that's imploding and in disarray. So when they are fighting themselves, they can't unite to listen to what Israel wants, or what they're definitely not going to listen to.
But they're also like made up of evangelicals, conspiracy theorists, and people who hate, you know, Jewish people, but overwhelmingly are religious nutbags.
A weak, fragmented Republican Party is bad right now for Israel's interests. Right? Israel needs Donald Trump if they want to keep doing shit like this. And when they don't have Donald Trump, you know, it's almost a miracle that this didn't happen before Donald Trump left. Because if you were going to be a strategist and you were Israel and you wanted to press the case with Gaza, that would probably be the time to do it. Not after he's gone, but before he's gone. So I think all of those factors are coming together and making this to be, I mean, you know, conflict is very likely in that region. We may see another multi-nation war in that region that could last for a long time. And I think that's bad for everybody, most of all for the civilians on all sides that are caught in the middle.
Really good points. And all, you know, we can flesh so many of them out, but let me come back to the issue that I wanted to also talk about, that made sure we have to talk about always with you, which is veterans issues. You've been talking a lot about, I guess, probably the top 3 issues that have been getting a lot of coverage, and, you know, always rightfully so, are the pullout of Afghanistan, burn pits. But I want to start with this one where there's a major development, and arguably a good one, which is sexual assault in the military. We could talk for hours about what the problem is, but how would you, take as much time as you want to talk about what the issue is?
Here's the issue. Tens of thousands of our own troops were sexually assaulted in the military last year. Tens of thousands. We don't even know how many, because many
That's just last year?
In the last year was reported 2018. I think it was 38,000 sexual assaults in the military. Okay, tens of those were reported. Okay, so tens of thousands of American troops are being sexually assaulted. That's the issue, right? They're more than ISIS, more than the Taliban, more than any enemy. Our own troops are being hurt by their own. So that is a strategic priority. It's a moral imperative. It's critical to the future of our country. If we want a military that can fight wars or deal with a pandemic, people have to be safe in their own military, and they're not. And for too long, it hasn't been addressed. The Me Too movement, swept across the country, but the military was too slow, I think, in many ways to catch up to that. And there was a critical piece that we have been focused on when I was at IAVA with Senator Gillibrand, most of all, which was allowing accusers to go outside the chain of command to report assaults and harassment, and to go outside of their military chain of command. And the military fought that. And for the most part, Republicans fought that. They said you have to change the military from within. They have to be able to trust their bosses. And we said, look, it's too far gone. We need an emergency solution that takes it out of the chain of command. And many Republicans fought it. Many in the military fought it. In the last couple of weeks, the dam is broken. Joni Ernst, the Republican vet, has now aligned with Gillibrand. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Milley, has now broken ranks. And we now have, I think, over 60 votes in the Senate. So you're going to see really transformative, important legislation that really fundamentally changes where people who are assaulted can go for help. And that, I think, is an important change that we've been working at, honestly, Pete, for maybe over a decade. Gillibrand, for a long time, was the only one working on this. Everyone said, forget it, it's never going to happen. But a lot of things have changed. And this is one example of an overdue change that's happening right now.
Paul, sometimes, I think every generalization we make is probably wrong, and we simplify people and their roles as they identify. But when I think about veterans and the veterans community, I think a lot of things. I think of all the good things that they've learned and why they joined in the first place for any number of reasons. But I also think some bad things often I generalize about. And my question to you is, it's hard for me. One of the things I struggle with when I think veterans and all that they do and putting them on a pedestal, I often think, man, there's a lot of bad people committing sexual assault, because this has been an epidemic. It's been called an epidemic in the military forever. That means there's bad people doing bad things. I don't want to simplify it that way, but what is going on? Why is this such an issue, do you think? And is the answer simply way more female leadership?
Well, look, I'd be careful to label anyone a monolith, right? Israelis, sure. Palestinians, the military, right?
But did I sound like I was? I didn't mean to say. No. I'm saying they're complex.
What I mean is this is a problem in America, right? And the military is always a reflection of that. So how the hell did Harvey Weinstein go for so long? How did all these things happen for so long? Because our culture was broken, and the military can be at the head of progress and change, or it can be behind, and it's always going to be reflective of our country. And here's the real core issue. Why is it so bad in the military? Because too many political leaders let it get that bad. Same is true with extremism. And I'm putting the blame on the commander-in-chief, most of all. It's Trump, but it was also Obama, and it was every president before then that didn't address military sexual assault in the military. They also didn't address extremism aggressively enough. Like a year and a half ago, you could fly a Confederate flag in the barracks. Okay, when Barack Obama was president, you could fly a Confederate flag in the barracks. That should have been changed a long time ago. But military leaders have been deferred to by political leadership. So many on both parties to say, oh, it's the military. We have to let them figure it out. They're not China figures, right? Like they're not made out of glass. Like they are part of our society, and they follow our orders as an American people. So I think political leadership has been cowardly. And that's why it's been allowed to go on. Passes have been given. Just like Harvey Weinstein, there are Harvey Weinsteins in the military because there are Harvey Weinsteins in society, and they must be dealt with. And it's all of our responsibility. But most of all, when it comes to defending our troops, it's the commander-in-chief. So every day, Biden has to do more to protect them in uniform and to deal with these issues. They're making progress. They're going in the right direction. But they waited too damn long. Right? Like extremism was not news. We knew there were extremists in the military. We knew they could do something like take over the Capitol. If you weren't paying attention, you didn't think it was possible. But if you were paying attention and you read the reports and you saw the testimonies, you knew this could happen. And so it's like a 9/11, right? It's a social 9/11 to have these attacks happening. The attack on the Capitol was another 9/11. It was significantly transformative, damaging, but preventable and predictable.
Let me just, if you have time, ask you just about that. I appreciate that answer, by the way. I think there's a lot more to talk about with this, and the legislation is going to pass, right, on sexual assault.
I hope so. Look, let me just give you one more point on this. Ted Cruz is on this. Like, it has been from the beginning. Like, unlikely bedfellows politically, but this is the sort of thing where Kirsten Gillibrand kept doing press conferences with Ted Cruz about it. And most people don't know that. So there's a lot of shit happening in D.C. and there's a lot of dysfunction, but we do have to look to the places where they actually are getting things done for the American people and figure out how we can do more of that and how we can build on it at a time where I think Biden's going to run out of some of that gas, right? That 50-50 split is going to start to kick in this summer and into the fall in the Senate. And it's going to get harder to get things done. So we're going to have to find ways to work together and across partisan lines.
What a shame that is, that we have to work together with crazy people that are such a minority of America because of the Senate rules of 50-50. Like, or just because of the Senate representation.
Too, right? Like,
what?
Like, Pete, how the hell is Ted Cruz still a senator, right? I mean, how are these people still there? I mean, it's amazing to me.
Because they are doing whatever they need to do to stay in power. In this case, telling a huge lie about the election. That's how, because this is my thing.
Or because enough of us haven't gotten involved, right? Like, how many people really supported Beto O'Rourke? How many people don't?
I mean, I think it's true. Enough of us haven't gotten involved. That's for sure. And get involved locally. And I've been saying this for my whole life. And you taught me how to get involved when it came in the military. You were the guy on that issue for me. But no, I just, you talk about independent. I agree with a lot of that in, the kind of pie in the sky idea of it. But the United States Senate is stupid. We have to work together to get, quote, bipartisan laws with absolute crazy people that represent a small percentage of Americans, because there are 2 senators in Wyoming representing less than 1 million people versus 2 senators in California that is representing 33 million. It sucks that we have to work with people that are total crazy conspiracy theorists, because there's no working with them, Paul. There's no working with them anymore. They're done.
I don't disagree with that. But
they're also anti-democracy. How do you work with people who will do whatever it talk about honor, teaching your kids honor, to cheat to win?
Yeah, but doesn't it suck more that there is, that Cornyn and Cruz represent the great state of Texas, that Marco Rubio, we know thousands of friends in Florida, in Texas, great people, good leaders.
But that's because of gerrymandered districts in Texas. That's why.
You can whine about it or you can win. Right. And too often, I think
it's not whining. It's identifying the problem. I agree with you. It could sound like I'm whining right now, but get involved in your district locally and elect people that can win. But it's very hard to win in a gerrymandered district when you're running against people who are
counter-argument. Yeah. Hey, people got involved in Georgia and it worked. Right? We could very easily have 2 different senators in Georgia right now, but the focus was there. The country got involved. You had great leadership from Stacey Abrams and others. You just need more Georgias, right? If Florida and Texas were Georgia, you wouldn't have to deal with Ted Cruz. You wouldn't have to deal with Marco Rubio. And I think that's coming. And I think it's coming in large part, I think, from independents too, not just Democrats who are fed up with the Democrats failing to beat people like Ted Cruz. The only thing worse than Ted Cruz is that they can't beat Ted Cruz. Right? How can you not beat Ted Cruz after all of this? Right? That's where I think leadership in the political parties needs to go. And we need alternate solutions. And this is why somebody like Matthew McConaughey is a real factor, because people are so sick of it that they're going to choose none of the above. And it's how a guy like Matthew McConaughey or someone like Jesse Ventura or someone like Donald Trump can get elected.
Yeah, but that's not the Democrats' fault. I think you're right. Texas is going to turn blue eventually, but this country is broken in terms of the way it is. The political system is made up, and obviously money and politics. But you're talking about independence, and you're saying this is why Matthew McConaughey. But I'm trying to sit here and say, no, Democrats have put forth amazing candidates in Texas for a long time.
You and I have disagreed about this. I don't think
you don't think Texas. Good. You don't think Beto O'Rourke was the.
I like MJ Hagar. I don't think she's an amazing candidate. I don't think most people who just heard her name even know who she is, Pete. I don't think the Democrats have done a great job.
Most people in Texas do. What about Beto O'Rourke?
I don't think most people in Texas knew who she was. I really don't. I think this is my core point, right? They know who Matthew McConaughey is.
Yeah, but either one of them. Yeah, but that's just. But what does it say that name recognition is the most important thing? She was obviously.
You can cry about the refs and the rules, or you can just win the game with what you got. And if the Democrats had run, let's just play a game out, right? If the Democrats had run Matthew McConaughey instead of MJ Hagar, maybe they would have someone in the Senate they could deal with other than Ted Cruz, right? Is he great? No. Is he better than Ted Cruz? Yes, right? And instead, they have MJ Hagar, great person, great bio, great record, get stomped, right? At some point, you got to figure out how to win the game with the cards you're dealt with.
What do you say? I know, but let's talk about.
That's what Stacey Abrams did. Stacey Abrams worked the game while she changes it. And that's
there are amazing. But what you're saying right now is discounting the amazing work of progressive organizations in Texas by saying that those progressive organizations that are doing the exact same organizing as Stacey Abrams, who gets a ton of credit and should, but these other people, what are they supposed to do?
Effort's nice, but you got to win. And
but what are you saying? That they should have selected Matthew McConaughey? You're saying, how do we get Ted Cruz and John Cornyn? And I'm telling you, the Democrats did nominate people who were far better and would be far better for Texas by telling them that.
Win, Pete. They couldn't win, right? Same was true with Lindsey Graham. Same was true across the board. All these candidates that people up in New York and California got so excited about, right? Jamie Harrison and all the others. Good people, great records. I had Amy McGrath on my show. Amy McGrath was not going to beat Mitch McConnell.
So you're saying what kind of candidates?
That's fantasy land, pushed by consultants too, and Democratic Party leaders who want you to donate to a candidate that has no fucking shot. Zero fucking shot.
What are you saying? What are you saying in general because you're agreeing with me that the Republican Senate is overwhelmingly fucking crazy. They're crazy people.
There's plenty. Yes.
Power hungry, anti-democracy, conspiracy theorists. And so what are you saying? That progressives should be more progressive, should nominate people?
I'm going to say this. I'm going to say America has to do a better job of ensuring that lunatics don't get elected. All Americans, right? Leadership needs to all Americans need to recognize Marjorie Taylor Greene, bad for America. Right? Bad for American national security, bad for our children, bad for everything. So everybody should focus on beating Marjorie Taylor Greene. I don't care what party you're from. I don't care who she's running against. If you think you're better than the person running against her, then you run. But that has to be everybody's focus. And afterward, how many people are really right now they're complaining about Marjorie Taylor Greene? How many people know who her opponent is? How many people are mobilizing to get her out of there? How many people are working the machine while they change it? Because that's what a real strategy is. Multiple lines of attack, okay, that create redundancies if one fails, right? Yes, do a recount. Yes, change the voting rules. But in the meantime, get somebody less crazy in there, right? Get somebody less crazy than Marjorie Taylor Greene and start to work incrementally.
You can't get somebody less crazy if the whole fucking district is crazy. That's how she gets elected. Their whole district is crazy. That's how she won.
You don't think a moderate Republican who's I don't know, like a wounded war veteran could beat her in her district?
No, we've seen them lose all the time.
Okay. Well, we'll see again.
I would as often happens in our discussions that we sometimes argue. I would love to be wrong. I'd love to be wrong. Let me ask you, though, about one last question that won't be about politics or me having much of a point on, other than I will give myself credit for covering this issue as a member of national media at SiriusXM in 2008. I looked it up because not to tout me. Well, I guess I am. But more importantly, to say this stuff was readily available. We knew this was happening in 2008. Burn pits. We got a lot of attention when Jon Stewart went down to Washington a couple weeks ago. What do we need to know about where we are at and if we're going to do something about it?
So first of all, thank you for bringing it up. You've been covering it when many people didn't. Afghanistan is ending, but the long-term impacts are not. Right? We got to protect our interpreters over there who are getting slaughtered. Yeah. We got to try to do our best to still deal with threats in the region. We got to try to help the Afghan army. And we've got to do things like take care of the veterans coming home. And about 1 million of them have served in Afghanistan and have been exposed to what we call burn pits. It's our generation's Agent Orange. And Agent Orange took about 50 years to get recognition and support from the government. Burn pits has taken about 20. So we sent troops into Afghanistan 20 years ago this fall, okay? And ever since then, they've been experiencing toxin exposures where the military puts a bunch of shit in the ground and sets it on fire instead of throwing it away. They just burn it. And we've been breathing it in for 20 years, and now we're getting sick. And we finally have a legislative package of about 20 pieces that are necessary. John Tester is the Democrat in charge of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, and others are finally moving this forward. But Jon Stewart was, again, the one that put it over top. It was just like the Zadroga bill, just like 9/11. We've been banging away for years. And then Jon Stewart came in like a nuke strike and shamed the shit out of everybody. Yeah. There's an example of like asymmetrical political warfare, right? Yep. Like, yes, if we sit there and pound and testify and do all that shit and beg, please, 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 don't let us die. Please, please, please give us money so our lungs don't fall out. We could do that for 20 years. Or we get Jon Stewart to come in and blow it all up.
I'm all for celebrities being advocates for any issue that matters.
A lot of grassroots activism. This is a time of year where,
of course,
a lot of politicians want to get credit. Politicians, for the most part, come in and sign on the dotted line afterward. They add some amplification, but it's the activists. Some of them who are often dead, like Ray Pfeiffer died. He was a firefighter who died before the Zadroga extension went through. Many burn pit victims have died before we're getting burn pit legislation through. And those are the people who should be recognized and get the credit. I appreciate Senator Gillibrand. She's been intrepid. Others have been too. But the activists are the ones that bring it to her door and keep it going every single day. And we're getting there. So burn pits, Google it. You can find out more. But hopefully we'll have a legislative package that goes through this summer that has to include what's called presumption, which is a key here, Pete. You have to assume you've been exposed. If we have to fight our government to show we've been exposed, then we're in another battle against red tape, just like we've had over and over again. So assume that if you've been there, you have a presumption you've been exposed, and get us treatment and care and research. And then we found the money to pay for the war. Right? We should be able to find the money to take care of the people who went there. I don't want to hear Rand Paul and other assholes quibbling, saying we don't have enough money for this kind of stuff.
Sometimes the argument will be made, they'll try to make a scientific argument, whether it be about Agent Orange or now in this case, this generation of veterans burn pits, where they say, or as you mentioned at 9/11, that was the issue. Well, we can't connect your service in this area at this time to the malady that you're now suffering with, whatever it is. But I always, when I think about burn pits or even Agent Orange or 9/11, I feel like you don't have to ever have gotten anything above a C in science. I feel like two idiots are standing next to a fire. In this case, it's you and I. We're standing next to a fire. What horrible beer are we drinking in the woods by this fire?
Is that a rhetorical question?
Yeah, tell this narrative.
In this, we're drinking Miller High Life.
We're drinking Miller High Life in the woods because this is what guys do. And I throw a bag of trash, plastic, and medical supplies, and then I take a shit on the fire. One of us idiots is going to say to the other, dude, I know you wanted to burn all that shit, but we probably shouldn't breathe it.
Yep.
Like, the point being, you don't, like, we know this was horrible when it was happening. That's why I was talking about it in 2008, because you knew this shit was going to happen. They burnt everything. Human waste, medical waste, plastic, metal, ammunition, you name it. Every fucking chemical you could come up with. Guys were burning it, stirring it, breathing it. We don't need an investigation. Take care of them.
That's it. You got it. I mean, this is one of those ones that I hope everybody can get understandably upset about. Look, like, I didn't have to justify my rationale behind the policy when you sent my ass to Iraq, right? I mean, I didn't have to, you didn't care if my teeth were falling out, if my legs didn't work. You sent my ass over there and plenty of other people, and we didn't question it. When we come home, we got a battle to prove to you that we have cancer. Like, it's a lot like voter fraud, right? You'll hear these people say, oh, we're worried about fraud, worried about Johnny Veteran who's going to rip off the government and go buy a Ferrari. Like, how many times is that going to happen relative to the hundreds or maybe thousands or tens of thousands of people who are going to die in the meantime? Right? It's a bullshit argument that people like Rand Paul and others put forward for whatever reason. I mean, I think I had a hashtag Rand Paul is an asshole. He finds new ways to be an asshole every time. But he voted against the Zadroga bill. He voted against the extension. He'll probably come out against this kind of stuff. But we need to have the country be like a steamroller and just run them over. Just run them over, get it through. Don't let these vets fight for 30 years and do what's right. And here's one thing. I got to call somebody out. Joe Biden's still been quiet. He has said he thinks his son, Beau Biden, may have gotten cancer because of burn pits. And his VA has still not supported presumption, and he has not supported presumption. So he's really letting us down here. He needs to come out, and Memorial Day would be the right time to do it, and say, presumption, maybe Beau would have lived. And then it's boom. The argument's over. The president said it. We can move on to other shit. But we need the president right now to step up and answer this call. And I don't know why he's not. I have no real good explanation, but he's really disappointing us on this one.
Paul Rieckhoff, whenever we talk, I always wonder why we don't talk more.
Because we have a whole bunch of shit going on.
Actually, that's the answer.
You're a good dad, and you're running a business, and you know. I love you, man, and I love your audience. I got to give them a shout out because a lot of these folks we've been talking about for a long time. A lot of your folks been DMing me and hit me on social and donating money to support these causes. Thank you all. You've always been great. Memorial Day is coming up, and IAVA will again do the Go Silent campaign, where you can go silent for 1 minute on Memorial Day wherever you are. Hashtag Go Silent. Everybody can be a part of it, and also join Pete's Patreon. It's really good.
Thank you.
Like he's my Patreon idol. He does a lot of cool shit with his Patreon that I'm still trying to do. But help this man do his good work.
Thank you very much for all your kind words. Thank you for over an hour of your time. I love talking to you, and I hope to talk to you again soon, Paul. Thank you.
Love you, man.
All right. Thank you very much for listening to today's podcast. Let me know what you think about when I dropped it, if it makes any difference at all to you. Some of you are still listening to the Days and Weeks Ago podcast, catching up. Some of you listen daily. I need to probably put out a survey to find out what is best, when it is best. But right now, just tried it for at least today. And I'm going to head out for a run now because I can. The sun is up. Have a great day, everybody, whenever you're listening to this podcast. Thank you very much for your support. Please let Paul Rieckhoff know that you enjoyed our conversation. I love you. I'll connect with you on the Discord chat if you're a subscriber. If you want to call for your birthday, you can email me, whatever you want, whatever I can do within reason. I'm not going to come over and clean your house, although I would for a small fee. I'm pretty good at decluttering garages and attics. Let me know. standupwithpete@gmail.com. Thanks for your support. Talk to you tomorrow.
Listen when you start making sense and you stand up. Stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up. Stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw the land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up and show obedience to the voice inside. And listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up. Stand up. Got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the darkest hour. Stand up. People got the power. Stand up. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Come on, come on, come on. Stand up.